Hola mis amigos, we're making key lime cake. So I'm not very much of a cake person, but when I do eat cake, I enjoy a nice citrus cake. Usually a citrus cake would be a lemon cake, and usually limes are used for pies. But I thought I would mix it up a little bit. So we're starting off with 2 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And we are just going to get these ingredients whisked together. Now we're ready to move on to the wet ingredients. We are starting with 1/2 a cup or 1 stick of butter. And to that we are going to add 1.5 cups of sugar. And we just want to go ahead and blend this together on medium speed just to get our butter and sugar nice and creamed up. Alright, so now that our butter and sugar is nice and fluffy, we want to beat in 3 eggs. And we want to put them in one at a time. And we're just going to beat them, and then we'll add the next one, beat it, add the next one, and then we will proceed. Okay, so we've successfully beaten our eggs one at a time. So now we have 1 cup of buttermilk, and we are going to rotate between beating in our dry mixture and our buttermilk, starting with the dry mixture. So we're going to start off with about 1/4 or so of our dry ingredients. And then we're just going to get that beat in, and then we will continue with our buttermilk. Okay, so we've mixed in some of those dry ingredients. So now we're going to add in some of our buttermilk. I'm going to use about 1/2 cup out of our cup of buttermilk. And you get the idea. We're going to go ahead and blend this together, and then we're going to go back to the dry ingredients, and we're just going to rotate until we are finished. So we'll be back when that is done. Alright, so we finished playing roulette with our ingredients here. So now we are ready to proceed. And the texture of this mixture is so nice. It's nice and frothy. It's almost like a whipped cream. So I can tell that this is going to be a really moist and fluffy cake. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to add the zest of 1 lime, just a regular sized lime. It'll be about 2 tablespoons or so of lime zest. And then after we've zested our lime, we're going to cut this lime in half and juice that half and add that juice into this batter. So we will be back when we're ready to add the juice of the lime. Okay, so our lime has been zested. So now we have cut the lime in half, and we're just going to add the juice of that half of the lime. 1 lime produces about 1/4 a cup of juice, which is 4 tablespoons. So this half should produce about 2 tablespoons of lime juice. And I really want that lime flavor to come through, so I'm going to add a full tablespoon of lime extract. And you may have some trouble finding lime extract. Usually you'll see lemon extract in the stores, but here's my lime extract. If you have trouble with it, you can get it online. Can't remember how much I paid for it. I think it was about $9, and this is 2 fluid ounces. If you can't get your hands on the lime extract, then just add another tablespoon of lime juice and you should be okay. So we're going to go ahead and beat these ingredients together, and then we will return. This next part is completely optional, but I want my cake to be nice and green, so I'm going to add a few drops of green food coloring. If you don't have green, of course, you can use blue and yellow. And I'm just going to start with about 5 drops, and then I'm going to blend this together and keep adding drops until it's the color that I want. But again, this part is completely optional. You would be finished with your batter right now if you do not want to add any color to it. So I'm just going to blend this together until I get the color that I desire, and then we'll be back. We are back, and our batter is nice and green and fluffy. So we're ready to add it into our 2 8-inch cake pans that we have sprayed with cooking spray, and I've lightly dusted them with flour as well. So if you have the cooking spray that has the flour in it, that's probably the one that you will want to use. But I don't buy that kind since I rarely need it, so I just added the flour manually. So we're just going to split this dough, or batter rather, evenly between our 2 cake pans. And then I think I forgot to mention, you want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And we're going to bake these 2 cakes for 30 minutes at 350. So we will be back once I get these into the pans. Okay, so our 2 cake pans are nice and filled as evenly as possible, considering that we're eyeballing it as we try to halve them into the pans. And at this point, what we want to do is just give them a nice few taps on the counter. And what this is doing is just getting out any air bubbles that may be in our batter. And we're good to go. We're going to pop this into the oven, 350 degrees for 30 minutes, and then we'll be back. All right, so 30 minutes has passed, and we have stuck the middle of these guys with a toothpick, and they did come out clean. So we're just going to let these cool in the pan on a wire rack for about 10 minutes before we take them out of the pans, and then we will prepare our frosting. So we will be back in about 10 minutes. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes, and the cakes have begun to pull away from the sides of the pan, so that's a good sign. So now for the most nerve-wracking part of this entire recipe, and that is making sure that we can get these out of the pans without breaking them. So here goes cake number 1. Okay, so I did get it out, but it wasn't easy because they are not quite cool enough. And as you can see here in my pan, we did lose a little bit of the cake, but that's not that big of a deal. So I'm going to wait another 10 minutes or so to make sure that the other cake is completely cooled before I attempt to take it out. Okay, so we've gotten both of the cakes out of the pans, and they're on the cooling racks directly. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to line the bottom of your pans with parchment paper so that it's easier for you to get out later. But I didn't do that, so it was a little bit more difficult for me, but I got it done. So while they're cooling completely on the cooling racks, we're going to prepare the frosting. So we have 1/4 of a cup of butter, which is half a stick of butter. And we have 3 cups of Confectioner's powdered sugar, along with the zest of 1 lime. And we have 1/4 of a cup of fresh lime juice. And we're just going to whisk this together. And I'm not much of a frosting person at all. I don't like that extra, sweet layer smothering the cake, so I won't completely spread this all over my cake. You'll see when we get to the frosting part. So I'll probably have a lot of the frosting left over. But if you really do enjoy a lot of frosting, definitely go for it. Alright, so our frosting is nice and mixed up. It has a really nice consistency, and it doesn't make as much frosting as you might think for 3 cups of the confectioner sugar. So if you feel like you need more frosting, then you may want to double up on your recipe. But go ahead and use this first, and then figure out if you're going to want to add more. So our cakes are completely cooled, so now we are ready to go ahead and frost the cake. So we're just going to frost this one layer at a time. And as you can see here, I did break the cake just a little bit trying to get it out, but it's still pretty well intact. So again, you might want to use parchment paper in the bottom of your pan. All right. And as I said before, I don't really care too much for frosting, so I am just going to put a nice thin layer on top here and not too much on the sides. Okay, so there's layer number one, and I forgot to give you my little disclaimer. I'm terrible at decorative baking, so don't expect this to look pretty, but I promise it's going to taste delicious. So now it's time for layer number two. And we are just going to frost this just the same as we did our other layer. The vibrant green is awesome. Just makes the cake have that extra pop, and it actually kind of tricks you into thinking that it's going to taste better just because of the color. Okay, so we are back and we have completely frosted the cake. I did decide to go ahead and frost the entire cake, and I just garnished it with a little bit of lime slices that I had left over. And I did have quite a bit of frosting left over, about maybe a fourth of the frosting that I made, so you really don't need to make any extra. And by the way, this frosting is hands down one of the best tasting frostings out there. If you like citrus, you're going to love this frosting, and it complements this cake very well. And this cake, although it is a dessert, it's very refreshing, and I think it would be a fantastic accompaniment to your afternoon tea or just a pick-me-up in the middle of the day. Key lime cake. Enjoy, and I'll see you at the dinner table.